This is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. McMahon, up until the end of January, was the executive chairman of World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, and their parent company, TKO. Almost monopolizing the industry in 1982, McMahon has been an ever-present figure since, withstanding controversy after controversy after controversy. To build his empire, McMahon has allegedly accumulated many skeletons in his closet, including the death of a wrestler named Owen Hart by his own company's negligence.
Tragedy befell the World Wrestling Federation and all of us. Owen Hart was set to make an entrance from the ceiling, and he fell from the ceiling. And I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died from that accident here tonight.
McMahon has presented unethical storylines on TV, the mistreatment of people of colour, supplying illegal anabolic steroids to his wrestlers, which resulted in a high-profile court case, and the most recent allegations, the sexual abuse and trafficking of an employee, all inside of Vince McMahon's own company. McMahon considered himself to be bulletproof. The most recent allegations that McMahon sexually assaulted and trafficked an employee has precedence, and according to the most recent court documents released in January, McMahon recruits Laurinaitis into his exploitation of Miss Grant and transfers her into Laurinaitis' department at WWE, Trafficking and Sex Acts at WWE headquarters. On June 15, 2022, a report came out from the Wall Street Journal about McMahon making a $3 million undisclosed payment to a former employee with whom he is alleged to have had an affair with. And due to this undisclosed payment, he stepped down as WWE chairman and CEO on June 17th, just 2 days later. To showcase how unfazed he was regarding these allegations, McMahon went on Friday Night SmackDown to say WWE's tagline in front of a live audience. Then, now, forever, together.
It is a privilege, as always, to stand before you here tonight, the WWE Universe. I'm here simply to remind you of the 4 words we just saw and what we call the WWE signature. Those 4 words are then, now, forever, and the most important word is together. Welcome to SmackDown!
On July 8th, the Wall Street Journal released another damning report going into the details of the McMahon allegations and scandal. And just 2 weeks later, on July 22nd, Vince McMahon announced his retirement on Twitter. That night, once again on Friday Night SmackDown, his daughter Stephanie McMahon opened the show and led chants of "Thank you, Vince," for her father, despite his offences to Miss Grant being known, on top of other allegations for hush money payments, NDAs, and sexual assault.
But since Vince had the opportunity to thank us, I think this is the moment that we take to thank him. So now we're gonna do it together, right? Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Vince.
While McMahon retired, his influence never waned on WWE. When McMahon ran WWE, he was the head of creative for their television programming. In essence, McMahon could tell whatever stories he wanted on television, and his word was final. But just a few months after retiring, Vince McMahon tropes started making their way back onto television, influencing the production of the show by his successor, his son-in-law, Paul Triple H Levesque. It was clear McMahon still had major influence in the company. Albeit not nearly as much, McMahon still being involved in the company with which he had exited due to such damning accusations meant the company couldn't move on or improve their practices. In fact, WWE had no choice but to double down with their defense of McMahon by reinstating his position on the WWE Board of Directors in January 2023, and McMahon immediately made changes to the WWE bylaws that state, in essence, that no media rights deals or company sales can be completed without his approval. Using his controlling stake in the company, McMahon held the company hostage to facilitate his return. McMahon knew that the longer that he was in charge, the longer he could bury internal investigations and stories about his scandals. In a case of deja vu, last month the Wall Street Journal released another earth-shattering article and published court filings for a former employee suing WWE, John Laurinaitis, and Vince McMahon. While this spelled the end for McMahon in control of WWE, this isn't his first rodeo with allegations such as these. In 1992, Vince McMahon was the sole owner and controller of the then WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, and alongside his status as the CEO, controller and booker of the company, he was also the promoter, which meant that he had to go onto radio programs, television programs, and do interview pieces in newspapers. One of the earliest allegations against McMahon is in February 1992, and while McMahon didn't do anything physically, he knowingly and intentionally enabled misconduct involving children. McMahon's team consisted of head of wrestling operations Pat Patterson, ring announcer and ring crew Mel Phillips, and McMahon's right-hand man Terry Garvin, who announcer Mel Phillips directly worked under. The allegations made were that Patterson and Garvin engaged in a casting couch culture with wrestlers and other personnel, and that culture allowed Phillips to use his job to groom underage ring boys who he would then molest. All three resigned from their positions. Just as the scandal started breaking to the media, McMahon, in a phone interview with Phil Mushnick of the New York Post, conceded to Mushnick that he fired Phillips over his suspicion that Phillips's relationship with kids seemed peculiar and unnatural. Mushnick wrote, "According to several highly placed sources, a lawsuit will be filed soon alleging that male WWF administrative employees and executives sexually harassed and abused underage teenage boys who were engaged as ring assistants in the mid and late 1980s. McMahon poured his heart out on this call with Mushnick, going into detail over the rehiring of Phillips. Mushnick wrote that Vince told him that he had let Phillips go 4 years ago in 1988 because Phillips's relationship with kids seemed peculiar and unnatural. McMahon said he rehired Phillips a few months after that with the caveat that Phillips steer clear from kids. McMahon sued the New York Post for defamation but didn't dispute the accounts of the conversation, and also didn't dispute the accounts of a similar conversation with the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer. Meltzer claims that he got a similar call from Vince McMahon as Mushnick did in March of 1992. He didn't say Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips were guilty, Meltzer recalls. He just goes, "There was an innocent person here, Patterson." He didn't say the others. For decades, media outlets have reached out to Vince McMahon and Jerry McDevitt with questions about this topic, but Jerry McDevitt refuses to speak on this topic and declines to answer any questions. In 2021, however, Babyface vs. Heel uncovered an FBI memo from September 1993. This revealed that the Bureau had a videotape of Mel Phillips molesting a boy in a ring before a WWF show in the exact same way as described by accusers. In this report, it is stated that the WWF had previously obtained a video copy of this in the first half of 1992, amid the initial allegations. The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, in a separate memo from December 1993, disregarded this evidence because it happened in a public setting, with their reasoning being that because it happened in a public setting, there are too many alternative explanations. On the morning of March 11, 1992, the San Diego Union Tribune writer Jeff Savage released an expose on the WWF titled, "Sleaze No Illusion in the World of Wrestling. Sex, Drug Abuse Seen in Industry of Heroes." The expose went into great detail surrounding steroid use and the steroid scandal in professional wrestling, but also included quotes from a former professional wrestler and former ring announcer about unwanted advances in the WWF and the culture there. At the end of the expose, Savage wrote about the ring boy allegations, and two former ring boys went on the record and revealed their names in an attempt to make an impact. "Boys are getting propositioned and played with all the time," fellow accuser Chris Loss recalled. "You sort of put up with it because you can make a lot of money. I know if I would have slept with those guys, I'd probably be rich right now," said Tom Cole. "It was really sleazy." Little did McMahon and the WWF know that this was only the first article in a series coordinated by several media outlets. Every day of that week, sometimes several in one day, there would be a new article targeting the WWF and Vince McMahon. On March 12th, there was an article released about the psychological effects of steroids and roid rage. That evening, there were stories on news programming surrounding the WWF scandals. That night, Entertainment Tonight gave Barry Orton the floor to denounce the WWF. Even later on that night, on The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson compared WWF wrestlers to pop music fraudsters Milli Vanilli. On March 13th, Vince McMahon and WWF attorney Jerry McDevitt received a courtesy copy of the lawsuit text via fax for the molestation case. The complaint hadn't been filed yet, but outlined Tom's demands of $3.5 million in restitution. Just a couple of hours later, McMahon called and was ready to negotiate in person. McMahon, his wife Linda, and attorney McDevitt were told by the victims that they wanted $750,000 to settle the case, and if McMahon didn't meet their demands, that they would see them on TV. Tom Cole's account of the conversation is as follows. I told Vince everything that happened to me. He looked disgusted and upset about it. Vince responded, well, you know Tom, this is a terrible thing that happened to you. Vince said, I want to make it right. This isn't the type of company that we run. These people have left the company. His attorney, Fuchsberg, raised the possibility of a big money settlement. McMahon stated that this was a lot of money, to which Tom Cole blurted out that this wasn't about the money and that he didn't care about the money. Fuchsberg kept walking out of the room and leaving me in there for 15-20 minutes at a time with Vince McMahon and his wife. Eventually, an argument broke out between McMahon and Fuchsberg, and Vince said to Fuchsberg that I'm like a rat. I'll go for the throat if I have to. I won't be backed into a corner. Vince got up to leave, and Linda and McDevitt joined him. Tom panicked and shouted at McMahon, no, I just want my job back. Fuchsberg left the room again, which left McMahon once again alone with Tom Cole, and McMahon explained to Tom in a delicate manner that he himself was molested as a child. I want to start on a clean slate with you, Vince said. I want to take care of everything. How would you feel about that? Tom accepted Vince's offer and got $55,000 in restitution and a job in the WWF's crew department. The $750,000 was never discussed again and was dropped. McMahon played Tom like a fiddle, coaxing him into settling for considerably less money than he was entitled to and that he wanted. Tom Cole was fired in June 1993 for failure to regularly attend his school classes, which was also part of his agreement with the company. Tom said he couldn't attend school due to the abuse that he suffered. Sadly, in February 2021, Tom Cole took his own life. His brother still blames Vince McMahon and the company for his brother's struggles. On April 6th, a woman named Rita Chatterton appeared on a tabloid-esque TV program called Now It Can Be Told. On this program, Chatterton alleged that McMahon raped her in a limousine in 1986. At the time, Chatterton worked for the WWF and was the first ever female referee. Chatterton recalled that she met McMahon in his limo where he forced himself on her twice, then fired her by invoking a rule that she could not fraternize with her co-workers. McMahon would sue Chatterton and the television program runners in February 1993 but would drop the suit a year later. At the time, the WWF was amidst trials for child molestation, for sexual harassment, for trafficking illegal performance-enhancing drugs, so dropped the suit. Out of fear, Chatterton did not speak again of these allegations for 30 years. In January 2006, McMahon was accused again of sexual assault at a tanning salon in Boca Raton, Florida. McMahon was a regular at Tanzabar Tanning Salon, and his daughter Stephanie McMahon also confirmed this, and McMahon had a seasonal residence in the area. There, the tanning salon employee alleged that McMahon showed her unsolicited nude photos of himself and then forcibly groped her. When she managed to get away, McMahon allegedly told her that he was only trying to have some fun. The story broke in the Palm Beach Post a few days later. 1 month after that, the South Florida Sun-Sentinel did a follow-up about McMahon questioning why he had not been charged. There was no follow-up with the story for 12 years. In January 2018, the Daily Beast uncovered a police report that said that there was probable cause to charge McMahon, but they didn't. 2 weeks after that, Deadspin posted their piece, which was being worked on concurrently with the Daily Beast story. This included quotes from an eyewitness that was named in the police report. The witness recalled that McMahon stared down he and the accuser in the parking lot for 45 minutes before the police arrived. And of course, McMahon was not charged. In 2007, Ashley Massaro, Maria Kanellis, Ron Simmons, Gary Hart and Jimmy Hart were selected to go on a 2-week tour in support of troops in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. While in Kuwait, as per her own 2017 affidavit in a class action lawsuit against the WWE, Massaro started experiencing menstrual cramps. She asked to remain in the Humvee where she was comfortable and it was air conditioned, but US Army soldiers insisted that she was dehydrated and to take her to the medical bay. She was informed that she would need an IV for dehydration, and despite protesting against this, the soldiers ignored her protests. When she arrived in the sick bay, an IV was placed in her arm almost immediately. Jimmy Hart checked on Ashley and Ashley informed him that she was waiting for a doctor to arrive, so Jimmy and others left the camp to get lunch. After a couple of hours, a man in an orange t-shirt and shorts appears, and Massaro heard others say that it was his birthday. The man presented himself as a US Army doctor, but Massaro doubts this as the man was not in scrubs like the rest of the facility. While in the sickbay, IV already in one arm, the man administered an IV of unknown substance in the other arm. In Massaro's own words, "Almost immediately after, the alleged doctor and the woman in fatigues moved me into a room that did not appear to be a treatment room and placed me on a table. The woman guarded the door while the man proceeded to inject me with a drug that caused me to be unable to move my body or to scream." In Ashley Massaro's own words, she describes the rape that's about to take place. "The man then proceeded to violently rape and sodomize me. I was completely helpless to defend myself against this attack as the drug he injected rendered me temporarily paralyzed. Despite being unable to control my movements, I remained fully conscious for every second of the attack. I felt excruciating pain as a result of this man penetrating me by force and against my will, in a violent and aggressive manner, while I was completely defenseless. Each second that went by was excruciating, and I have never felt more helpless or more terrified in my entire life. The experience was a living nightmare." Eventually, Gary Hart returned and was banging on the closed door to be let in. The man and the woman yelled 1 minute and threw a dirty quilt on Massaro as she laid naked on the table. Massaro was still limp and unable to speak, so Gary Hart wrapped her in the quilt, took her out to the Humvee and took her back to the hotel to sleep. When Massaro woke up hours later, she felt an extreme sense of abandonment and was not able to process what had just happened. Massaro was unable to get a rape kit administered due to where she was. All of her friends had just gotten on a flight to London, but she couldn't get on this flight because her ticket was inexplicably missing. She arranged her own flight by calling a friend of a friend who was able to get a flight arranged for her. Once she arrived back in the United States, Dr. Rios examined Massaro and questioned the incident that had happened in Kuwait. Massaro was unsure if something had come back in her bloods or if somebody had informed the doctor of what had happened, but she decided to reveal to the doctor what had happened under the condition of confidentiality. She did not want him to tell anyone what had occurred. Dr. Rios then informed Vince McMahon, who then informed Kevin Dunn, John Laurinaitis and other executives and lawyers in the company. A meeting was called between all the people just mentioned and Ashley Massaro. In Massaro's own words, "Vince led the meeting with these men and asked me to recount what happened in Kuwait. Then he said it was not in the best interest of the WWE for me to make the information about my attack public. I was still completely traumatized at that point and I just agreed. It was clear that there had already been a conversation and that they had reached a decision on their own prior to consulting with me, as this was not a debate but rather Vince instructed me to keep this confidential." Massaro went on to say that while Vince apologized for this incident and for what she went through, that if she disclosed this to the press that it would ruin the relationship between the WWE and the US military. Vince allegedly told her not to let one bad experience ruin the good work they were doing. While some changes were implemented in future, such as women having 24/7 escorts on these tours, Massaro said the damage was done and there was no support in place for her. She stated in her affidavit that she did not have the power or the evidence to go against WWE, so remained quiet. Massaro went on to talk about Vince McMahon, saying, "Vince approached my rape in the same manner he approached all wrestler injuries. He did not want to damage the reputation of the WWE by making them public knowledge, so he exerted extreme pressure on us to stay silent, to perform whether or not it was safe to do so, and had almost no regard for our well-being. We were treated as replaceable commodities. WWE's top priorities seemed to be generating profits and avoiding liabilities, regardless of how this affected its workers." Massaro felt like she had to remain silent to keep her job, and that WWE was putting severe pressure on her to keep a lid on all of this. On May 15, 2019, Ashley Massaro did not turn up to work at a radio station. The next morning, paramedics responded to a rescue call in Smithtown, New York, and found Massaro unresponsive in her home. She was pronounced dead when she arrived at the hospital. Media outlets at the time speculated on the cause of death, and the speculated cause of death was suicide by hanging. After her death, the referenced affidavit was released by Massaro's lawyer. The WWE responded to this release. WWE is saddened by the death of Ashley Massaro, and we reiterate our condolences to her family. However, we regret that her attorney, Konstantin Kairos, who filed multiple cases against WWE, lost all of them, and was sanctioned multiple times by the court for repeated misconduct and false allegations, is using Ashley's death to further his malicious campaign against WWE by releasing an affidavit that she submitted to the court and later apologized to WWE for being involved with, so we wish to make things crystal clear. At no time was Vince McMahon or the management of WWE ever informed by Ashley Massaro or anyone else that she had been sexually assaulted, drugged, raped or sodomized by a military doctor with a nurse standing guard while on a goodwill tour in 2007 to US military bases in Kuwait. In fact, if she ever articulated such a claim to WWE, he would have reported it immediately to the base commander. At no time was there ever a meeting with Vince McMahon, Kevin Dunn, John Laurinaitis, or other company executives in which she told them of such a claim and was instructed to keep it quiet. In September 2021, a USA Today article stated that her cause of death was indeed hanging, and it spurred a mental health discussion in the wrestling landscape. These allegations that McMahon and WWE knowingly and willingly convinced a rape victim not to report their rape has validity when paired with the other accusations and allegations against Vince McMahon and the company. In February 2024, Vice News published an article with quotes from John Laurinaitis' lawyer, who told Vice that most upper-level management at WWE were aware of Massaro's rape allegations. This directly contradicts WWE's version of events 18 years ago. There's still more to expect here, which may come out in a future trial, but I am glad to see that people are treating this situation with the sensitivity and the seriousness that it deserves. It's very important that we don't forget about the victim in this situation who is no longer with us. Ashley Massaro. On January 28, 2022, a woman that we now know as Janelle Grant signed an NDA releasing Vince McMahon and the WWE from liability and agreeing not to disclose any information about their relationship. The NDA says McMahon will pay Grant $1 million 10 days from the agreement of the NDA and $500,000 on February 1st of each year from 2023 to 2026. On June 15, 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that WWE's board of directors hired an independent law firm to investigate a $3 million settlement that McMahon paid to a former subordinate months earlier. This stemmed from a series of anonymous emails that the board received on March 30th, 2022, allegedly from a friend of Miss Grant. This in turn turned up additional settlements with other women. Miss Grant's name was not revealed at the time. According to the emails, Miss Grant had gotten a raise from $100,000 to $200,000 annually due to her sexual relationship with Vince McMahon. The emails further alleged that McMahon gave her like a toy to John Laurinaitis, becoming his assistant in the process. WWE and McMahon's long-term attorney Jerry McDevitt formally commented in response to the journal. WWE did not pay any monies to the paralegal on her departure. McDevitt then went on to say that she had not alleged any sexual harassment. A WWE spokesperson said the relationship was consensual, but the upcoming allegations explain why that is not the case. On the morning of June 17, 2022, WWE announced that Vince McMahon is stepping down as chairman and CEO of WWE on an interim basis for the duration of the internal investigation. Stephanie McMahon, who had stepped down from her role as WWE Chief Brand Officer on May 19, 2022, right before the allegations and article from the Wall Street Journal was released, returns to the company and becomes interim chairwoman and CEO of WWE. Vince McMahon did not step down from his role as head of creative. As stated earlier, this allowed McMahon to retain complete control as to what happened on WWE programming. WWE announces that Vince McMahon will appear live in person on the SmackDown broadcast that night. On the evening of June 17, 2022, Vince McMahon opens Friday Night SmackDown and speaks to the audience. I'm here simply to remind you of the 4 words we just saw in what we call our WWE signature. Those 4 words are then, now, forever, and the most important word is together. Welcome to SmackDown. According to Fightful, afterwards Vince goes back through gorilla position, which is the curtain to go to the back, and shouts "fuck 'em" Just 3 days later, in an attempt to show how bulletproof he is, McMahon makes an unscheduled appearance live on Monday Night Raw, which is WWE's flagship show since 1993. McMahon announces John Cena will return and doesn't reference the scandal whatsoever. On July 8, 2022, the Wall Street Journal released a second article reporting Vince McMahon paid $12 million for NDAs across a period of 16 years to 4 women who had previously been WWE employees. McMahon agreed to pay $3 million to a former paralegal who we now know as Miss Grant, and McMahon paid $7.5 million to a former wrestler. The former WWE wrestler alleges that she was coerced to give Vince McMahon oral sex, and when she rejected his advances, she was demoted and then her contract wasn't renewed. The report also reveals 3 other NDAs. In 2006, McMahon agreed to a $1 million NDA with a former manager at WWE that McMahon had a sexual relationship with. Secondly, a WWE contractor alleged McMahon sexually harassed her at work and that McMahon sent her unsolicited nude photos. McMahon agreed to a $1 million settlement in 2008. In 2012, an NDA was made with a WWE employee who made misconduct claims against head of talent relations John Laurinaitis. This totaled $1.5 million. The employee alleged that she and Laurinaitis had an affair and he demoted her after the relationship ended. On the morning of July 22, 2022, Vince McMahon announced his retirement from WWE in all roles effective immediately. Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan are named co-CEOs of WWE, but Vince McMahon remains the controlling shareholder of the company. That evening, Stephanie McMahon leads chants of "Thank you, Vince" on Friday Night SmackDown. 3 days later, on July 25th, the Wall Street Journal reports that the SEC and federal prosecutors are investigating the NDA payments. On July 8th, Laurinaitis is fired by WWE. On July 9th, WWE discloses 2 additional payments totaling $5 million made by McMahon that should have been recorded as company expenses but weren't. On August 17th, the Wall Street Journal confirms a report by WrestleNomics that the additional $5 million in unrecorded expenses was actually for the Trump Foundation for appearances in 2007 and 2009. On November 2nd, 2022, WWE reports quarterly earnings and discloses the internal investigations into allegations of sexual misconduct by Laurinaitis and McMahon have concluded. On November 3rd, 2022, Rita Chatterton's lawyer sends a letter to Jerry McDevitt, McMahon's lawyer, demanding $11.75 million in damages for allegedly raping her in 1986. Soon after, in November, a lawyer for a former spa manager sent Vince McMahon's lawyer, Jerry McDevitt, an email claiming McMahon assaulted her in 2011 at a California resort. On December 13, 2022, the Wall Street Journal reported that McMahon has told people that he intends to make a comeback at WWE. He said that he received bad advice from people close to him to step down, and that he now believes the allegations and investigations would have blown over had he stayed. A week later, on December 20th, 2022, Vince McMahon writes a letter to the WWE board saying that he needs to return to the company to explore a sale of the company and to negotiate upcoming media rights. On November 22nd, 2022, the WWE board responds to McMahon saying that they are unanimous in their decision that he should not return to the company. The board says they have a shareholder demand letter urging them to sue McMahon, but they won't sue McMahon if he agrees not to return to the company and to repay the company for the cost of the investigation. 4 days later, on New Year's Eve of 2022, McMahon responds to the board in writing, saying he won't approve of any company transaction or media rights deal unless they facilitate his return to the company. As controlling shareholder, McMahon had this power. On January 5th, 2023, using his controlling power, McMahon re-elects himself back onto the board. McMahon holds 80% of all voting power in the company. A day later, on January 6, 2023, WWE announced that it will explore a sale of the company. Stephanie McMahon leads an all-staff meeting explaining Vince's return to the company and that they're looking for a sale. Stephanie tells employees, "This is an exciting time, it shouldn't be a scary time. Our founder is back on the board and is going to help lead this process." Just 4 days later, on January 10, 2023, Stephanie McMahon permanently resigns from all positions in WWE. On January 19, 2023, the Wall Street Journal report that Vince McMahon and Rita Chatterton have reached a multi-million-dollar settlement for far less than the $11.5 million that she was seeking. On March 23, 2023, Endeavor offered WWE an all-stock deal to merge WWE with the UFC. Endeavor accepted the terms proposed by WWE for a 49-51 split. The terms stipulated that McMahon would be the executive chairman of the newly formed entity, and this would remain until either his resignation, incapacitation, or death. This would eventually be known as TKO. On April 3rd, 2023, an official announcement was made for the merger of WWE and the UFC. Appearing on CNBC, McMahon says the merger would have happened regardless of the controversies. Asked if he has any regrets, McMahon says, Well, let me just say I've made mistakes, obviously, both personally and professionally through my 50-year career. I've owned up to every single one of them and moved on. Later that evening, for the first time in 9 months, McMahon is backstage at WWE Raw and makes heavy changes to the post-WrestleMania show. McMahon went straight back to old habits, and according to reports, this heavily impacted employee morale. On July 17th, federal law enforcement agents executed a search warrant and served a federal grand jury subpoena on Vince McMahon, according to WWE's quarterly earnings report published later on August 2nd. No charges are pressed against him. 4 days later, McMahon begins medical leave to have spinal surgery. On August 3rd, Vince McMahon provided the comment, "I've always denied any intentional wrongdoing and continue to do so. I am confident that the government's investigation will be resolved without any findings of wrongdoing." On September 12, 2023, the merger officially closes, merging the UFC and the WWE into a newly formed entity called TKO. Over the following months, there are several stories and business dealings with TKO, such as McMahon selling stock, receiving dividends, The Rock joining the board, among other things. This leads us up to the latest shocking allegations and court filings. On January 25, 2024, there is a lawsuit filed in federal court in Connecticut against WWE, Vince McMahon, and John Laurinaitis by a woman named Janelle Grant. She accuses Vince McMahon of sex trafficking and seeks to have the court declare her 2022 NDA unenforceable and void, in accordance with the Speak Out Act. The filing highlights dozens of occasions of sexual assault, trafficking, and degradation by Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis, some of which occurred at WWE headquarters. The filing claims that multiple WWE executives were aware of what was happening to Miss Grant, but nobody intervened. Miss Grant claims McMahon used her sexually as part of a contract negotiation with a WWE talent who was a former UFC heavyweight champion. Although not mentioned by name, the Wall Street Journal later reported that this is indeed Brock Lesnar. The filing claims that she was given like a toy to Laurinaitis and that Vince McMahon made Laurinaitis her boss, forcing her to work underneath him. Miss Grant took the job with WWE because McMahon dangled life and career-changing promises in front of her after the death of her parents and severe financial difficulty. During several meetings about the aforementioned job, which had not been created yet and was being created specifically for Miss Grant, McMahon greeted her in his underwear, touched her, repeatedly asked for hugs, and spent hours sharing intimate details about his personal life. McMahon warned Miss Grant to keep their closest a secret and that he had world-class legal resources on retainer to deal with people who became a problem. When McMahon pushed for a physical relationship with Miss Grant, the situation felt impossible. Face ruin or give in to McMahon's sexual demands. On June 17, 2019, McMahon made a role for Miss Grant as an administrator coordinator in WWE's legal department. She remained in that role until she was relocated to John Laurinaitis' department in March of 2021. Over the coming months, she was promised time and time again promotions to a higher position, but this never came to fruition. Despite attempts to end the relationship with McMahon, McMahon expected the relationship to continue as part of her employment. In March 2020, Vince McMahon started sharing explicit photos and videos of Miss Grant to both men inside and outside the WWE, including with members of the television production team, executives, producers, and specifically mentioned a world-famous athlete and former UFC heavyweight champion with whom WWE was actively trying to sign to a new contract, and ultimately did sign that contract. Once again, the Wall Street Journal later confirmed that this is indeed Brock Lesnar. McMahon, who was the CEO, had complete control over Miss Grant. McMahon allegedly recruited individuals to have sexual relations with Miss Grant and or with the two of them. He directed Miss Grant to go to Laurinaitis at the start of work days for sexual encounters, and expected and directed Miss Grant to engage in physical activity at WWE headquarters even during work hours. The level of degradation that Miss Grant suffered is horrifying. In one instance, on May 9, 2020, McMahon defecated on Miss Grant during a threesome and then commanded her to continue pleasuring his friend, with feces in her hair and running down her back, while McMahon showered off. In June of 2021, McMahon and defendant Laurinaitis sexually assaulted Miss Grant inside Laurinaitis' office in WWE headquarters, while colleagues were busy at their desks. Behind a locked door, they cornered her and pulled her in between them, forcibly touched her, before ultimately putting her on top of a table between them. She begged them to stop, but they forced themselves on her, each taking turns restraining her for the other while saying, "No means yes, and take it, bitch." Miss Grant suffered severe panic attacks, sleep disruption, dizziness, exhaustion, rashes, weight loss, hair loss, and migraines, which stemmed from the ongoing trauma of this situation. When Miss Grant informed McMahon of this, he said, Emotional trauma, my ass. McMahon then pressured Miss Grant into switching to a doctor of his choosing. The doctor provided treatments and products to Miss Grant which she did not pay for. McMahon paid for everything and Miss Grant never saw any receipts for anything. When Miss Grant questioned the treatment she was being given, the doctor said that if she did not trust him, they should part ways now. On March 26, 2020, McMahon sent a lengthy message to Miss Grant describing in detail the circumstances surrounding sharing explicit photos of Miss Grant to a former WWE referee. McMahon described how the former referee left to masturbate and told Miss Grant that she had made a perfect stranger very happy. In May 2020, McMahon recruited an individual which he manipulatively referred to as his friend to engage in a threesome with McMahon and Miss Grant. The individual turned out to be a physical therapist from the same clinic that McMahon made Grant switch to. On the day of the threesome on May 9th, 2020, Miss Grant showed up to the condo but reiterated that she did not want to go through with the act. She expressed fear of being thrown around like a rag doll by McMahon and physical therapist. After Miss Grant clearly stated that she wanted to back out, McMahon responded by telling Miss Grant for the first time that he loved her, stunning her into silence. McMahon's manipulation worked, and Miss Grant engaged in the threesome. When they went downstairs, the physical therapist was already there waiting to engage. Early in the encounter, McMahon immediately directed Miss Grant to lay down on her back in a supplicating position. While straddling over her, McMahon defecated on Miss Grant's head. McMahon left the shower off, but he instructed Miss Grant to remain in place with excrement in her hair and to continue performing for his friend. While Miss Grant requested protection, none was offered. McMahon and physical therapist actively continued with the threesome and directed Miss Grant's sexual performance for around an hour and a half while she was left covered in feces. Over the course of multiple encounters, Miss Grant sustained brutal and painful injuries including bleeding, swelling, bruising, and spasms of incontinence resulting from McMahon's forceful use of his fists, adult toys, and objects unsafe for vaginal insertion and penetration. These themes continued for months and months, and then Miss Grant was offered to John Laurinaitis. On or about December 29, 2020, a threesome was arranged between Laurinaitis, McMahon, and Grant at McMahon's condo. McMahon instructed her to tell Laurinaitis that she was a neighbour and girlfriend working in the legal field, but not at WWE. McMahon would book in appointments to traffic out Miss Grant, as per text messages contained in the court filings. Johnny wants Tuesdays but not this coming one, and the occasional Saturday but maybe I can shift it to Thursday nights. Johnny would like all of the above. After the initial exchanges with Laurinaitis, McMahon moved Miss Grant into Laurinaitis' department. McMahon would then go on to inform Miss Grant that if Laurinaitis wanted to bring more men into the mix, that she should be supportive in this. Per McMahon's instructions, Miss Grant reported interactions with Laurinaitis back to McMahon, for whom the story served as a source of arousal. On June 15, 2021, Miss Grant messaged McMahon that due to her work on an important project, she did not want a threesome that week, as a threesome won't set me up for success, it'll knock me out. To avoid pushback from McMahon, she offered the following week instead. McMahon and Laurinaitis ignored her plea and forced her into Laurinaitis' office, forcibly touching and undressing her before forcing her to engage in a threesome on a conference table. Miss Grant pleaded, "No, no, no, and please stop." McMahon responded with, "No means yes." Miss Grant again told them to stop. Instead, McMahon licked his fingers and penetrated Miss Grant and said, "Take it, bitch." On July 23, 2021, McMahon directed Miss Grant in the middle of a workday to meet him on the lower floor. When Miss Grant arrived, McMahon led her inside his private locker room, locked the door, and forced himself on her over a massage table. Later that day, $15,000 in Bloomingdale gift cards were sent to Miss Grant. On multiple other occasions while Miss Grant worked under Laurinaitis, he would call Miss Grant to his office, lock the door, unzip his pants, and instruct Miss Grant to perform oral sex. On or about July 12, 2021, McMahon directed Miss Grant to create personalized sexual content for a WWE superstar. McMahon shared the photos with WWE superstar and then informed Miss Grant that he likes what he sees. Please note that WWE superstar going forward is allegedly Brock Lesnar, as per a Wall Street Journal article. On July 21st, 2021, McMahon flew and/or caused WWE superstar to fly in a jet into a local airport and travel into Connecticut for what McMahon described to Miss Grant as a business dinner, as well as a sexual encounter with Miss Grant in McMahon's condo. Upon information and belief, the dinner was to discuss WWE Superstar's continued involvement with WWE. Prior to the business dinner with McMahon, WWE Superstar made a brief visit to Miss Grant's building. However, WWE Superstar did not return to the building for a sexual encounter because he was too intoxicated and taken back to the plane. Later that evening, after McMahon recounted the dinner conversation Miss Grant, he sought to salvage the night, and he recommended that they do a role-play scenario in which McMahon would refer to himself as WWE Superstar. McMahon was so physically rough in this encounter that Miss Grant begged McMahon to stop numerous times, including loud cries of "Help, I'm serious, and I'm scared." McMahon's assault caused Miss Grant to break down weeping and curl into a fetal position with her arms pulled up to protect her face. McMahon alternated between slaps and shoves before admitting that "I'm really fucking up with you right and left tonight, huh?" On August 26, 2021, WWE was holding its annual SummerSlam event in the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Around this time, McMahon and WWE Superstar reached an informal verbal agreement about his return. That night, McMahon texted Miss Grant, "I want to drive you lower and lower, so low that you might beg me to sell you." McMahon continued to advertise a sexual encounter with Miss Grant as part of the contract negotiations with WWE Superstar. In December 2021, McMahon gave Miss Grant's number to WWE Superstar, saying that she'll do anything requested of her. In the days that followed, WWE Superstar revealed a fetish to Miss Grant and tested McMahon's promise that Miss Grant would do anything with the request as she sent a video of herself urinating. That same month, WWE Superstar expressed to Miss Grant his desire to set a play date and have a sexual encounter. However, a snowstorm changed WWE Superstar's travel plans, and Miss Grant ultimately used the weather and COVID-19 as an excuse to back out. On January 24, 2022, McMahon continued his sexual text message exchanges with Miss Grant and encouraged her to send photos to WWE Superstar. McMahon then asked for proof that she had sent these photos to WWE Superstar. During this time, McMahon was applying such pressure to get an NDA signed that negotiations only lasted 8 days. Miss Grant signed the non-disclosure agreement after McMahon implied severe ramifications for not doing so. After the NDA was signed, McMahon, wearing only a white robe, met Miss Grant in his condo to review outstanding business items. As Miss Grant was proceeding to the door to leave, McMahon grabbed her before she exited and commanded her to do one last thing and get on her knees. As Miss Grant knelt on the hard floor barely a few feet away from the front door, McMahon opened his robe and ordered her to eat him. McMahon grabbed the back of Miss Grant's head and slammed her face into his crotch a couple of times until she gagged and pushed him away, telling him to stop and that she couldn't breathe. McMahon responded that she wouldn't get away that easily and held her head as he forced himself back into her mouth until she had no air. Miss Grant tried to push him away, but he held her head firmly in place and loudly commanded her to look up, followed by "Take it, bitch." They momentarily made eye contact before McMahon's force caused Miss Grant's body to convulse and retch with tears streaming down her face. McMahon then released his hold and closed his robe as he stood up. After leaving, Miss Grant never saw McMahon again. On March 2nd, 2022, McMahon, still in complete control, instructed Miss Grant to continue engaging in sexual activity with other men, including WWE Superstar. On or around March 4th, 2022, WWE Superstar messaged Miss Grant that he was in New York. In line with McMahon's orders, Miss Grant provided the explicit photos that he asked for. On March 27, 2022, WWE Superstar reached out to Miss Grant once again. Miss Grant interpreted these back-to-back advances as an indication of McMahon's control. On March 30, 2022, Miss Grant's counsel received a call from McMahon's attorney advising them that there has been an anonymous email sent to WWE Board of Directors about Miss Grant, Laurinaitis and McMahon. Later in June and July of 2022, there were multiple stories breaking about McMahon's NDAs and settlements with multiple other women. Miss Grant did not receive the scheduled payment for her NDA in February of 2023. After the Wall Street Journal's report in January 2024, it had an avalanche effect for the WWE and for Vince McMahon. On January 26, 2024, Slim Jim withdrew their sponsorship for the WWE Royal Rumble, which was happening the next day. That evening, TKO lead executives Mark Shapiro and Ari Emanuel urged McMahon to resign from his post. McMahon agreed to his resignation according to an all-staff email. McMahon releases a statement claiming that he stood his ground and that Miss Grant's claims are all lies, and that he only stood down from his position for the good of the WWE and for TKO. The next day, due to his resignation, Slim Jim returns as a sponsor for the WWE Royal Rumble. Post-show, Paul Triple H Levesque takes questions from the media. He declines to talk about the lawsuit and said that he did not read it. When asked what WWE is doing to ensure the high-level staff are not taking advantage of subordinates, Levesque responded, "Everything possible." To avoid speaking about the situation, allegations, and lawsuit, Levesque was quite anxious in the situation and jarringly changed the conversation to the Netflix deal and the Royal Rumble show itself. On February 1st, Laurinaitis' lawyer said that John Laurinaitis is a victim too. Mr. Laurinaitis denies the allegations in the misguided complaint and will be vigorously defending these claims in court, not the media. Like the plaintiff, Mr. Laurinaitis is a victim in this case, not a predator. The truth will come out. Count how many times in the complaint Vince exerts control over both of them. A day later, on February 2nd, the Wall Street Journal reports that federal authorities in New York have been investigating the sexual assault and trafficking allegations against Vince McMahon. And now we're present day. On the day of recording, February 22nd, 2024, these are all of the sexual allegations against Vince McMahon. It is highly possible there will be a trial. All of the names that you're looking at on the screen right now are our patrons, and we love them very, very much, and they support everything that we do. If you want to become a patron, go over to patreon.com/dropmicwrestling, or there's a link in the video description. I cannot describe to you just how difficult this video was to make, trying to give it the sensitivity that it deserved, but also try to keep it as condensed as possible. The initial script for this would have been probably twice as long as this video would have been, and I took it down a completely different avenue to any other video that we've made in the past, where it's more of a commentary style video as opposed to loads of video footage compiled together. So if you enjoy stuff like this, please let me know. If you don't enjoy it, also let me know. This is important feedback for me, so I know what content to provide you guys in future. I will announce, if you've listened to this video this far, that the next video is on Eddie Kingston. I wasn't going to do the Vince McMahon one next, but it just felt appropriate for the time. So Eddie Kingston video will be out in the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much for your support, and I will talk to you guys soon.